So I admit, I like a sermon title that makes people scratch their heads a little bit. I didn't make this up. The venerable Buddhist teacher Thích Nhất Hạnh has said many times that Mother Earth is the most beautiful Bodhisattva. It's an idea that I found pretty significant inspiration in the past couple of months, and this Earth Day seemed like a good time to explain why. We might start with the question, what the heck is a bodhisattva? In Buddhist tradition, a bodhisattva is someone who lives and practices their faith for the good of others, rather than seeking nirvana just for themselves or seeking their own happiness. A bodhisattva acts primarily for others' well-being. Like most major religions, as Buddhism spread, it became incredibly diverse. So over time, concepts evolved. In early Buddhist tradition and contemporary Theravada Buddhism, Bodhisattva is an exceptional human being, like Dave was talking about earlier. And Mahayana Buddhism, which has a lot more elaborate ideas and spread across Asia, Bodhisattva functions somewhat differently. They're magnificent figures who are venerated by their followers. They're called upon for assistance and inspiration in a particular area of life. A very quick and probably too loose comparison, we might bring Catholic saints to mind, or various Hindu gods, or the Roman religious spectrum of gods. The most popular bodhisattva is Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. Here are a couple of images of him. Great. You may not recognize the name, but you've probably seen an image of him. He often is depicted with many different arms, symbolizing his compassionate acts. In East Asian Buddhism, Avalokitesvara is depicted as a female figure and takes the name Kuan Yin across China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. That's the white marble statue that you see in the middle is Kuan Yin. And I also brought a few images of temples dedicated to Avalokitesvara. He's also known with the popular mantra Om Mani Padme Om. So I'm sharing all of these details to demonstrate what a big deal it is to recognize a bodhisattva. In some places, the veneration of a bodhisattva really is the bulk of Buddhist life. So, when Thích Nhất Hạnh says that Mother Earth is the most beautiful bodhisattva, that's a really big deal. What does it mean? Well, there are a few ways of looking at Earth as a bodhisattva that might resonate with our UU lives. A big one for this Earth Day is seeing her as a place of refuge. Rather than using the word faith, often Buddhist communities will talk about taking refuge. Sometimes that's taking refuge in the community or in the teachings or in the realization that there's this spark of potential everywhere. I think refuge can be a helpful alternative to the word faith that I know a lot of us get hung up on. Buddhists never ask that you believe something that doesn't seem real or apparent to you. Rather, it offers this opportunity to find a comfortable resting place in times of challenge. A refuge. In this way, Bodhisattva Mother Earth can be a refuge in our times of struggle. Thích Nhất Hạnh says, we don't need to die to return to the earth. We're already here within the earth. Whether walking or sitting, we can breathe with the earth and learn to allow the earth to be in us and around us. We all forget about this connection from time to time. 99% of the time we forget about this connection. Reconnecting doesn't require any death-defying wilderness adventure or being 6 feet under. It can be as simple as taking a few breaths, appreciating that the oxygen that sustains our life is part of an organic cycle that is billions of years old. This breath is made possible by billions of years of other organisms living in relationship with one another. This one breath, and the food we eat, the water that we drink, are the fruit of a colossal global system of life that sustains us. The living earth provides our oxygen, water, and food. She also is a source of healing. None of us lives forever. We all age and experience illness. Often, we also experience healing in our bodies and minds. While technology is involved, it's ultimately material from the earth and a drive toward life that makes that healing possible. She has the power to heal herself and to heal us, and we can trust in that power. This is scary territory for Unitarian Universalists, but I invite you to explore a feeling of utter dependence on Mother Earth. Such vulnerability can be really frightening in a world that has sold us on the myth of independence and self-sufficiency. Rather than finding it frightening, though, I invite you to consider that sense of dependence as a refuge. She is big enough, strong enough, resilient enough for us to take refuge in. It is not all ours to fix and to hold. If you don't mind, I invite you to take a big, deep breath with me and practice letting go with that exhale. We might also see Mother Earth as the most beautiful Bodhisattva. In part, is her role as creator. She was the creator and sustainer of the Buddha, after all. Also the creator of Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, and all the human sages who have called us to love one another more fully. If credit is to be given for much of our goodness, it belongs in large part to her. I personally find inspiration in her patience, as I struggle to live a more human pace rather than a digital pace of life. She has shown great patience and adaptability to the massive impacts of humans very, very quickly. Natural processes have done a remarkable job breaking down our waste, absorbing our carbon, mitigating human-produced global warming. It's true that things are dire. It's also true that the earth has been incredibly adaptable and patient with our pathological denial of our impacts. She is slow and steady and offers the opportunity to see a much bigger picture. Part of why we're talking about Bodhisattva Mother Earth is tomorrow is Earth Day. For a long time, I didn't take Earth Day very seriously. I thought it was sort of gimmicky until I understood the history. The idea began in 1969 when the U.S. Senator from Wisconsin, Gaylord Nelson, was moved by a massive oil spill in Santa Barbara, not far from here. 1969, as we know, was an energetic year, we'll call it, politically. And he realized that if he could infuse that energy of the youth anti-war movement with the growing public awareness of air and water pollution, then they might be able to force environmental protection onto the national agenda. So Senator Nelson announced an idea for a national teach-in on the environment to the media, and he persuaded Pete McCloskey, a conservation-minded Republican congressman, to serve as his co-chair. They built a national staff of 85 people to promote Earth Day events across the country. They were wildly ambitious, and the plan worked. On April 22nd, 1970, 20 million Americans participated in rallies across the United States. Thousands of colleges and universities organized protests against the deterioration of the environment. The movement brought people together like never before. Previously, groups had focused on their individual issue, whether it was oil spills or polluting factories or sewage or toxic dumps or pesticides or freeways or loss of environment or extinction. But they gathered together for Earth Day. They realized how much more powerful their voices would be in one common environmental movement. Earth Day 1970 achieved a rare political alignment. Republicans and Democrats were involved. They enlisted people of all socioeconomic classes, rural and urban residents, business owners, and labor leaders. That slow, deliberate planning paid off in the long run. That same year, 1970, the growing environmental awareness gave rise to the Environmental Protection Agency, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water, and Endangered Species Acts. And then President Richard Nixon, probably due to his Quaker background, was surprisingly supportive of these efforts. Far from a gimmick or a kid's educational event, Earth Day has created real and lasting changes. Those victories teach us that while we attend to small issues in the moment, it's also wise to be big and audacious in our plans for the future and to think nationally or globally. If we don't make big plans and strategize around them, then we're never really setting the agenda. One of the elusive parts of Buddhism is how holistic it is. When we help transform ourselves, we're better positioned to transform those around us. Just last week, talking about generosity, I said that we're part of the culture around us. We are never just observers. The same is true with our orientation toward the earth. When we make efforts to live a greener lifestyle, when we orient our hearts towards sustainability and compassion for all living beings, we contribute to those realities in our wider culture. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the interdependence of community like cells of an organism. He says, just like a lotus flower is made of many molecules, and all the molecules come together in harmony to produce beautiful leaves and flowers, so too can a community bring together all the particular individuals to bring about a universal whole. There's a tendency to resist that idea of community as an organism for us, because still we want to hold on to our person, our sense of self. We're not yet ready to live the life of a cell in the body of a community. That takes quite a transformation. At the end of the day, it's that type of turn that will be required for us to thrive, though. The joy or the suffering of my neighbor isn't just as important as my own. It is indistinguishable from my own. We are in this together. That type of turn may feel far, far off, but it is fundamentally what we are called to. Remember, Bodhisattva Mother Earth is incredibly powerful, patient, and adaptable. I promise you, this is my final quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. there is still a chance. So recognize what you need to do it, and you will live in peace. This year, our Green Sanctuary Committee is focusing on stopping plastic waste for good reason. We learned about it in our Time for All Ages book. The microplastic stuff really freaks me out when I realize we are eating this stuff. In addition to packaging, plastic is pretty much everywhere, and there are good alternatives. It's in our furniture and storage equipment and kitchen gadgets and clothes, but wood and metal and natural fiber materials are usually there as an alternative if we take 2 seconds to think about it. But whenever we talk about environmental issues, partly as a challenge to myself, I think it's important to talk about the heavy hitters. The big differences in personal carbon footprint come from a few categories. 4 life decisions have meaningful impact on our carbon footprint. Here they are. Have fewer children. Become a vegetarian. Forego air travel. And ditch your car. Literally, in my manuscript here, it says, "To some of you, those sacrifices seem laughable." That doesn't mean that we can't keep them as aspirational goals, things to make incremental progress toward. Having more children isn't on the horizon for most of us. However, working to ensure that women have the right and the resources to choose when and if they want to give birth has a wide web of effect. Empowering women changes our world in just about every way that is good. And many of you are parents of adult children. I invite you to consider the implications of encouraging your children and grandchildren to have even more kids. The weight of your expectations on younger generations is stronger than you realize. I know that is a wildly unpopular thing to say in a room full of grandparents. So let me say something else that is unpopular. Ditch the car. Obviously, there's a range of options to consider here. Maybe your household can share a car. I think some of you actually do. Can your next car be more efficient, or a hybrid, or an electric vehicle? Can you walk or carpool when possible? There's a huge spectrum here. Beyond wagging our finger at those filthy, polluting monster trucks, we might also consider our own choices that we actually have power over. Air travel also has a huge carbon footprint. The farther you go, the higher the plane is, the worse the impact is. And Trappist members, I know, lift up the great cultural value of travel. It is life-changing to spend time with people from another culture. But that desire is in direct conflict with other values that we profess. So strike a balance. Foregoing one round-trip transatlantic flight each year cuts a person's CO2 emission by 1,600 kilograms. That one trip is almost twice the impact of having a vegetarian diet for that same year. I'm inviting us to think about adjustments. Writing this, I realized for the past several years, I've been making separate trips to visit family in Oklahoma and in Arkansas. It's more convenient for my schedule to make 2 shorter trips, and it's a little more comfortable with my emotional capacity for family. But writing this sermon, I realized that I probably need to rethink that strategy. Driving between the 2 would dramatically reduce my annual air travel. The other big shift many of us have made is taking a plant-based diet. Not eating meat reduces a carbon footprint 4 times as much as recycling everything that you possibly could. Our diet is one of the big ticket items. And of course, this is also a spectrum. And there's diminishing returns in this spectrum. Just cutting out beef and pork makes a huge impact. And these days, exploring all of the fun plant-based alternatives is pretty interesting. So, I want to name those 4 big-ticket aspirational items again. People don't talk about them because they're really hard and uncomfortable. But I believe we can do hard things, or at least name them. In order of impact, have fewer children, ditch the car, avoid air travel, and eat a plant-based diet. Friends, happy Earth Day. I hope you find celebration in this big, beautiful planet and sincerely take refuge. Feel the support of this beautiful Mother Earth. There is so much power and potential in her and in us when we set our minds and hearts to it. Amen.